Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello, everyone. Hope you all had lovely Christmases. It's our final pod of the year, live on YouTube, as we intend to be from now on when we record. Normally, of course, it would be sort of a Monday night sort of thing, but at the moment, it's all messed up. It's well, Sam will say a date in a minute, but it's Thursday. Our mums are watching on proudly, plus those who have also played into us from Let's Talk FPL's last video or something like that. Hello. A continued theme of a downward spiral in 2023 continues as we draw to a close. First half of the year for me was a triumph, as we'll speak about later. But the second half, this season basically, has descended into the doldrums pretty quickly. And you find me probably the most upset I am with FPL as I ever get. So this could be testy. Seriously, Sam, who is doing points? Because I'm not, and it's getting increasingly frustrating. As frustrating as it gets, I'm being glib. You know, my life is amazing. It's been a lovely day with my family. Be it I've been up since 6 a.m. with my daughter, so maybe that is also driving the discontent. But yes, anyway, back from my in-laws, the belly full of cheese and cold cuts of meat. My pretend veganism will return in January. I'm Tom. I'm here with a beer, and I'm joined by Sam as usual. You all right? Good Christmas?
Yeah, good Christmas. Merry Christmas to you as well. Yeah, I mean, I wish I was joining you in brighter circumstances, but the Tottenham game and the Arsenal game are not quite going to plan. I think we're both on a bit of a questionable week, FPL wise as well. So hopefully the holiday period has been good for you if you're tuning in today. As always, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, it'll be a bit shorter again, whilst we're in the busy festive period. Another tactical chat rather than a full fat pod with the quick turnaround. A few things to cover off, like whether or not playing aggressively or continuing with caution when you're in a bit of a rut, which I think both of us can comfortably say we're in at the moment. We'll be going through bold claims as always and questions from X. So thanks so much for any of you who sent them in on such short notice. We are recording on Thursday, the 28th of December. It's halftime in the Arsenal West Ham game. And as I am looking at my phone, I can see that Son Heung-min has just assisted for 4-1 for Brighton against Spurs. So, yeah, at least that's some points. But, yeah, that's time stamping it for the time being. And I'm sure other things will go on in the background whilst we're recording.
Yeah, the second half. I mean, I think if I've got double Arsenal defence if we go on to scores and the doors. So I think if that had been still no goal score for West Ham at this point, I'd be a lot happier. But you know, as it is, it's another disaster week, Sam. It's 27. Didn't take a hit. Just brought in Solanke for Archer as muted last week, and I don't really regret it because I think I was always going to do it. But nonetheless. Yes, a very, very poor week again, down from about 500k. Last week, I doubled my rank, and this week I've kind of added an extra kind of 100, 200k to my rank. So down to about 730, 740k, something like that. And it's just not going anywhere. I don't really know exactly what's happening. I feel like I'm in a bit of a rut at the moment. I feel like I don't know what it's been, whether it's just been a festive period and everything's just sort of passed me by for a couple of weeks while I've been looking after my daughter and focusing on other things. But it's just been a really frustrating period where I've just not been able to conjure up those one or two players that you really need at times like these to bring out the points for you. And I was reflecting just before we kind of came on air that I've gone from one extreme to the other really with FPL over the course of 2023, because at the start of this year and kind of going into the kind of the end of last season, I guess I was kind of having trouble mustering enthusiasm for FPL for a good reason almost, because I was doing well. And I think a lot of the pods with Lucy ended up being quite sort of desultory because we were both kind of like, well, there's only one obvious pick because we're both doing really well. You just pick this guy, you know, and you cover your rank. And that kind of, I guess, lost its luster. This year, I think I've been kind of quite positive about the fact that it's been a really interesting sort of opportunity to challenge, you know, go against the grain, etc., etc. But it's not quite come home to roost for me this week because I've not been able, and over the last few weeks, because I've just not been able to manufacture the scores I've needed to do do well, and it's just been a continuing sort of downturn, effectively. Porro's just got an assist, Sam, as
Oh, wow.
Martin Beaton's just said, so that's good. That's more points. That's always nice.
This is going much better than the last time we recorded during a Spurs game.
Let's just not watch the football from now on. Hopefully there'll be a Martinelli goal coming up next. Who knows?
Oh, let's not be too hasty.
Let's hang on. But yeah, no, it's been an incredibly frustrating little kind of period of time. So yes, I've got Saliba, White, and Martinelli still in play. Porro and Son have both registered assists. The continuing tragedy of Bernd Leno, Sam and I both have the reverse Midas touch when it comes to goalkeepers. I'm sure you'll talk about in just a second, but another negative XGP for Mr. Leno this week. Solanke came in, scored a penalty. Darwin returned within the first kind of 5 minutes and left a boatload of points at the table. I'm going to be honest. I'm from him. Salah really never looked like scoring. And other than that, a bit of a crap show all around, really. So yeah, kind of, I think, what's that? 33 now, I suppose I'd be on with 2 assists.
Yeah.
Which again, it's not going to ameliorate things that far, but hey, we'll talk more about kind of the continuing frustration a little bit. I think this is one to either feel schadenfreude about and feel good if you're doing well, or maybe commiserate with if you're not doing as well alongside me, I guess. Sam, you went for the, I guess, riskier option this week, and it has paid off for you because you said it's a grey arrow really you're on at the moment.
Yeah, so that grey arrow during this recording is probably just nudging into the green ever so slightly thanks to those 2 assists whilst we've been on air. So I think it will be something like a 20 or a 30k green, which again, it's better than nothing. But considering how big the red was last week, I was really hoping to correct it a little bit more straight away. But yeah, so the move I made last week was Trent in for the injured Tsimikas. I was weighing up all week whether or I say all week, all of the 2 days, whether or not I'd go for a safer pick in Gabriel and give myself that money in the bank so I could get straight to Haaland the following week, or go for the upside pick in Trent. And I am already quite glad I did that. Obviously, Arsenal have conceded. Who knows? Gabriel could score in the second half and balance that out a little bit. But it doesn't look that likely that Haaland's going to be fit for game week 20 now, given the news. So I took a bit of a risk. I feel like it's probably paying off, although it's a little bit too early to tell at this point. But yeah, 8 points from Trent. Even with the yellow, he got 3 bonus, which is quite ridiculous when you think about it. And yeah, it's just nudging a green arrow now, I think. But again, nothing spectacular. Darwin with the 8 points, nothing across my midfield, and Archer coming in for Palmer this week with an assist was actually quite jammy, and I'm feeling quite fortunate about that given the fact that everyone else seemed to have Solanke this week. Having Archer for just 1 point less felt quite like a get out of jail free card for me. Sure. In that comparison, I was quite scared of not owning Solanke this week. So yeah, I think going into the live stream today, I was on 35. So I think if my calculations are correct, it will be 41 now with the 2 assists added. So
Porro's on free bonus as well, Sam.
Pardon?
Porro's up to free bonus as well.
Is he?
Assist,
really?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
I don't know. He's on 5 points now, which is 2 bonus he's on.
2 bonus. Okay.
Yeah, so that's unheard of, really, in a
4-2 defeat.
Yeah, man.
That is unreal. But yeah, we'll keep track of that. But for the time being, small green for me, but nothing to write home about as it stands. So we can probably move on to the main conversation at hand.
Yeah, for sure. I think I just wonder really about this kind of continued frustration. I know that there's obviously people who have pulled stuff like Solanke out, stuff like Hwang this week, but I think you phrased it really well about what had happened this game week in terms of kind of death by 1,000 cuts, because it hasn't been potentially one individual destroying ranks for players who don't really own. Like you've got Hwang's own EO I saw the other day. This I think it's kind of near me, obviously, but I can't imagine it's gonna be too different depending on where you are overall. Kind of like 15%, 16%, something like that.
Yeah, about that.
Bowen around 30, Trent around 30. I don't own Trent, obviously you do. Alvarez around kind of 30-ish. Like all these little sort of players returning has kind of, I guess, had the compound effect of creating quite a hard wall to climb over, I guess, to get that kind of elusive green arrow. I mean, do you think it is that kind of, I guess, is it our teams are failing? Is it that kind of the template overall is failing, or is it just that, I suppose another kind of theory could be that just because like captaincy fails have obviously been something that's been spoken about a little bit on X over the last kind of couple of weeks after what's gone on. The last sort of captain that really paid off, I mean, game week 16, I think that was the week that Mo Salah was the vice and came in with the 16 pointer. But I look back and it was kind of game week 15 when Haaland scored against Spurs. Sorry, got 2 assists against Spurs. That was the last time that I can really think of a captain actually returning properly for me. So, I mean, what do you think is going on here, really? Especially, I know that you seem to have done a little bit better than me over the last kind of couple of weeks, but what do you think has been going on?
Yeah, so captaincy's big. I think that compounds what would otherwise be a fairly grey week for most of us in a couple of the last few weeks. Last week was a big negative for me personally, but I feel like that was maybe quite unique to me and you. It seemed like there were a lot of big scores going around last week and we just weren't a part of it. But yeah, I think the death by 1,000 cuts thing has started digging into me a little bit, and there's a lot of 30-20% owned players, and if all of them are hauling week in, week out, and all of my 50-60% owned players, looking at the likes of Gordon, Watkins as well, is stuttering a little bit at the moment. Trippier, obviously not in great form, not in our teams, but is highly owned. So Newcastle assets not doing great. There's been injuries, so we've been sort of all on the back foot, just making defensive transfers, trying to fix and patchwork our sides. And I think if I'm circling back to why we're all starting to feel this sort of negative impact in the last couple of weeks, I think it is the fact that injuries week in, week out have meant that some of the issues in our squads, or certainly in my squad, have been left to one side for a few too many weeks, when otherwise I would have probably corrected them. So Gordon might have been corrected by now, for instance. Lascelles might have been corrected by now. So that those sort of things that aren't major, like I need to fix these now kind of issues, because I've got transfers to use on the injuries, means that a lot of out of form players are sort of stuck in my team for a few too many game weeks when there could be upside elsewhere. And I think I'm just hopefully starting to get back ahead of it from next game week on, if we're lucky and if we get out of tonight without any more injuries. So I'm trying to think positively, but the last couple of game weeks, probably last 4 or 5 game weeks, I think all of my transfers have been on injuries, and it's meant that players that are arguably out of form or coming out of form have just stuck around in my team. And I think that's probably something that a few of us can relate to at the moment.
No, that's an interesting point. So I suppose and I think I also correcting mistakes is another thing, I suppose, because we both had to correct goalkeeper errors. We both had to draft Watkins back in, alongside removing players like Bumo and Sanchez, or I guess it's a goalkeeper thing. And yes, we're still left with a few more kind of little niggling issues to get rid of. So I've still got Shimikas rotting away. You've got Lascelles rotting away. We've also got, and we'll come on to it later, the the looming spectre of having to move on Son and Salah. So there's a lot to do and not that many transfers to do it with. So you're going to start to look at going into game weeks with hits as well. And I've got players who I've been complaining about a lot. So, likes of Martinelli, of course, Darwin, who was part of that Watkins mistake. And now we both appear to have bought a mistake as well in Leno, but I think he's just going to have to stay now, frankly, because at least he's actually playing.
Yeah.
So
no other keepers are getting points anyway, so just leave it.
It just feels like it's been a snowball to stay vaguely seasonal of errors effectively, or kind of just continuing to paper over the cracks as we kind of go along. And it has been frustrating, I think. And if you have done well, it has been the case that you've had 1 or 2 players, I think, every week who have come through for you, like those little sort of differentials. And I kind of wonder a little bit if that kind of lends itself to a different style of play a little bit. And I wonder as well if my rank sort of tumbling. I'm obviously aware that there's loads of people who are worse off than me. I think after those kind of 2 assists, my rank is now kind of sat around kind of 690k as opposed to 730k. But like, I don't know. I'm starting to wander a little bit back to my mind's starting to wander a little bit back to how it's been how it was before last year. And what I always kind of told myself was that if things did start going badly, I wish that I'd played more aggressively, because I never really did that in the past. I always kind of did the sort of sensible moves, the meta moves effectively. But I kind of always found that I didn't go anywhere. Yes, okay, there were a few sort of issues surrounding how I did. So there were things like not picking the right captain a lot of the time, because I've not been particularly great on captains. And I think I'm quite keen to just kind of keep that fairly safe. But at the end of the day, I wonder whether there is sort of an element of aggression that could come into my play now to try to catch up a little bit, especially if I'm stuck in a rut and I'm naturally kind of have a decent risk appetite. I just wonder whether that might be something that I do now, because I don't know. I think we've been talking about it a lot kind of the last couple of days. And my feeling is that, yes, okay, you can kind of get to a appreciably okay rank and kind of maybe kind of slowly but surely push yourself up, if you do adopt a cautious play style and just kind of play things by the book, as it were. My only sort of reservation with that is that kind of worked 5 years ago when you didn't have people from all walks of FPL engagement now kind of following the book and following that same sort of strategy. Like I've remarked on it several times that like at work, like loads of my colleagues who had no interest in FPL whatsoever are now doing ridiculously well. They've had a few people have had a couple of strong seasons. Like one of the guys who sits near me, probably my closest workmate, he's in the top 10k this year. He's only started playing FPL seriously over the last couple of years. Like kind of watches FPL Focal, and watches. I think he listens to us, but we haven't helped him at all.
we cannot be the reason.
So he's kind of following the paint by numbers, and the thing is that if you follow the paint by numbers too, I just wonder whether there's any sort of scope to really go anywhere. Like, yes, I know that there's always kind of let other people make mistakes, etc., but I do think that you need to have those moments, like with the Matoma and Estepinian I had last year early on, me having the double City defense, which really came through over the first sort of 4 to 6 weeks, which kind of ensconced me in a really sort of high rank. So I don't know, I'm kind of thinking to myself, is there a possibility that I look at kind of going a bit more aggressive? Because it might also mean that I regain my sort of sense of fun, especially if something does sort of come off for me, because at the moment season's in no man's land. I'm not entirely sure exactly where it's going to end up, and my kind of gut instinct is that if I just leave it and kind of not leave it, but if I just keep kind of following the well-trodden road, I'm going to end up with an okay season, but probably a season which is going to be below the top 100k. That's my instinct, Sam.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think we have probably a different style of management when it comes to these sort of things. But I am inclined to agree with you that because there are a higher pool of engaged managers all making sensible decisions, if you're behind at this point in the season, at some point you've got to make a dart for it, right? You've got to make a run. And I do think it's probably still too early to just randomly chucking out punts every week trying to figure out how I'm going to catch them, because at the end of the day, marginal gains still do exist, and over another 19 game weeks you should be able to catch the pack pretty easily if you keep making the sensible plays that keep getting the most points every single week. You should be able to catch them. However, I will asterisk that with saying that if you have a bigger pool of players then that are all making those decisions, you'll catch the majority, but obviously that pool of players that you won't catch will get bigger and bigger every single season. And like you say, it might mean that actually, even if you've had in inverted commas, good second half to the season, you might still end up outside the top 100k. So I think for me, it's about picking those moments, those battles where you can take the risk, where you think that maybe the crowd is overexposed on a player that you don't fancy quite as much as the meta are fancying them, and you think another 50-50 call, which is underexposed in the community, is a player that you actually back to outperform the more popular template pick. Now, that's not going to be the case with every transfer you make, so I would always urge a little bit of caution. But we're going to reach game week 21 next week, where we've all got an opportunity for at least 2 or 3 game weeks to have a look at some midfield differentials. And there'll be an argument to say, well, you could go for Jarrod Bowen, who's obviously already returned tonight, is looking fantastic, and one other. Or you can really mix it up. There's a whole pool of midfielders, and maybe a 2-3 week stretch where you can pick a midfielder that outscores the rest of the pack. That could be one of those moments in this season to help you climb ahead of some other people and maybe get on a player that rises in price, gets a few returns, and then becomes part of the meta, part of the template, just at the moment that you're thinking of getting rid of him. So yeah, I think it's about picking your battles. Don't do it constantly, but keep your eye out for opportunities, because at the ranks we're at this point, I think there's still half a season left. It's definitely not panic stations, but just always be open to those opportunities.
West Ham just scored again, by the way.
Yeah, I just saw in the corner of my eye. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
JWP.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. Oh god, it's I know what you mean. I'm not suggesting throwing up mad punts, but I am suggesting making reasons, educated gambles. Yes, not mad punts, but educated punts. Basically, Sam.
Yeah.
Bold claims writ large into FPL. So an example potentially this week may well be if it's a split pin captaincy, for example. So you've got potentially of Haaland out of the picture. You've got Newcastle looking pretty weak, so maybe Salah. You've got Son versus Bournemouth, albeit Spurs are probably not the most defensively sound team. They're still kind of decent going forward. Or you've got Watkins home versus Burnley. So maybe you could think, oh, okay, well, everyone's probably going to go on maybe one of Salah or Son. So maybe I go for option 3 in the Watkins captaincy. That sort of thing. Or say I wanted to remove Martinelli, maybe I'd look at someone who's not Bowen, who probably is kind of the premium, the premier option to bring in. Maybe I'd look at, I don't know, Foden instead. So I think I've mentioned him a couple of times. Yeah, I could play in the 10, and you made a good point over voice note that that's probably not going to last. But I mean, those are little sort of moves that you could possibly make. So I think part of my frustration perhaps is that my team has grown stale, and it's grown stale sort of against my will, because touching on what you said earlier on, we've just been firefighting for such a little while, and I've carried players like Martinelli. I think Ben White's going to have to stay now, but players like Martinelli, and I've kind of fallen into owning players like Darwin that really I don't really have much business actually owning. And I don't know. I'm not going to second guess and say I should have taken hits, because I think I'd probably be worse off now than I was before. Like, there's people who are kind of saying, oh, I wish I bought in Alvarez, for example, a couple of weeks ago for Darwin. Well, I mean, he's not exactly set the world alight recently. It's his first goal since game week 9 this week, and that was a very, very dodgy penalty. And obviously there's interest now because Sheffield United next and Haaland potentially being out. But yeah, I think it's those sort of trying to make the marginal game work for you within the context of things not being ridiculous. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm going to be buying in my man Tavernier and captaining him, but I am saying, for example, look at captain option 2 or 3, look at purchase option 2 or 3, and just trying to mix it up a bit, a little, really, and not go with untried, untested players. Go with tried and tested players, but maybe just try to kind of take slightly alternative paths to try to, I guess, be a bit more aggressive with it. And I think there's nothing more aggressive this year than going against kind of the zeitgeist captain. So yeah, I think maybe that could be something that I'd look at this week in adopting, going with Watkins, for example, who at home. So that's just not one of those little things that kind of made me kind of, I don't know, it has crossed my mind as being a potential sort of way that, don't throw the baby out the bathwater, as you always say, but a way that I can kind of attack the current situation without hopefully bleeding too much in terms of the other side of it, where if I kind of overdid it, overlooked a massive player. I know I don't know Saka, for example, but everyone doesn't. You can't own everyone. But just taking that sort of just going for something like that. I mean, does that kind of make a bit more sense? It's kind of more reasoned punting rather than punting for the hell of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were talking, I think it reminded me of a really key fundamental of where we can get our advantage of, and that is in the fact that if there is a big group of people all just consuming content and reacting based on the content, well, we can gain our advantage from actually watching the matches, studying the data ourselves, and trying to find little pockets, little advantages where other people might have missed them because they're not being talked about on the content that they're tuning into. So there's always opportunity. It's just the fact that our advantage over the average FPL player needs to maybe be reconsidered, and we might need to find a new way to break that template and to find our edge. And looking through the data, watching the matches, trying to find something with the eye test that maybe other people haven't picked up on. That's one of the most fun things about enjoying FPL and enjoying football. So I think if you've got some time to watch the extended highlights or watch the matches live, that could be where you gain your edge. And yeah, I don't think anyone's saying it's just a random punt, random chuck of a dart on the board and you'll just pick whatever player. It's an educated gamble. It's always going to be a guess based on what you've seen and what your research has kind of brought you to that conclusion for. So yeah, there's no question about it. It wouldn't be just random throws of the dart. There are logic. There is logic applied to every decision you make, and it's just trying to find that slight 51 to 49% edge over the rest of the board. And it's not easy, and it will backfire sometimes, but it's just making sure that over the long run, you're slightly ahead of the crowd.
I suppose if you're an engaged manager, that's kind of a blessing and a curse. Like, it's a blessing when things like, I guess, like planning for double game weeks way in advance, and I also kind of being on the leading edge of spotting the latest trends and things like that, and being able to do your own research, etc., etc. And as you say, watching things like this and the highlights to pick out a player who looks threatening, hasn't quite kind of made the market in terms of returning, but it is kind of ticking all the right boxes. Those sort of things are good, but it's kind of also a curse because it can mean that it's difficult to step back, and if you are in a rut, like, you can really feel like you're in a rut, like, obviously in context. I'm not a moaning buffoon. Hello, Honey Monkey. But still, I do think that being engaged it can be quite difficult if you aren't doing particularly well, because you kind of start to get into that phase, and we've spoken about it a few times this season, where you can kind of question everything that you do and not really kind of feel comfortable or in whatever decision you make. Like, you kind of feel like every decision I make is going to go wrong. You kind of lose that sense of confidence, and you can get on bad runs, and it's kind of trying to shake that off, especially if you are kind of all over it and trying to look at it as much as we do. I think that's kind of where the difficulty lies for me, I guess, that I do think about FPL more than I probably should, and that can kind of be, I suppose, a double-edged sword of why the frustration can deepen if things aren't going as you want them to. So yeah, I mean, getting out of it, Sam, for you sounds like just a case of kind of weathering the storm. Whereas for me, I'm going to be kind of, I don't know how to extend the sailing analogy because I've got no idea how to sail, but I'd be kind of racing ahead to try to beat the storm, if that makes sense. And I suppose it kind of comes down to managerial style a little bit. Like, I'm interested in taking a potential gamble on the captaincy at least this week. We'll come on to transfers and captains in a little bit. But with transfers, it really depends on a lot of things, and we've got to talk about the Son and Salah kind of situation, which we will do in a second as well. I think a lot of that kind of onward planning will affect what I do next. But yeah, adopting something aggressive and slightly against the herd, and trying to make the fact the herd is quite predictable work to my advantage, provided everything goes well on the day, is probably going to be where I will go. But it sounds like for you, it is a case, as I said, of just weathering it, modelling through, and just kind of hoping that next time the sun shines through, you will be in a good position to capitalise.
Yeah, I think so. And it is still. I'm always open to making those calculated gambles, but yeah, I think the way the path is set out for me at the moment, and we'll come into the teams and the transfers in a bit, but I feel like there are exciting routes I could take, but a lot of them would be sort of just taking them for the sake of it. And like I'm a planner, so I look ahead and I can see that a lot of the moves that I make now might actually put me on a step back or two in a few game weeks time, and might book in an extra transfer here or there. So I'm just hesitant to double down now, knowing that it could actually leave me in an even worse position a few game weeks down the line, when actually I'm actually quite close to the end of the storm, to finish off your sailing analogy by the looks of it. So, or at least hopefully, as long as no other players get injured tonight, I can start actually making transfers based on moves I want to make rather than moves I need to make in the next couple of game weeks. So fingers crossed. There's no telling, obviously, but I think hopefully I'll be able to weather the storm and come out of it a little bit better in January. But yeah, it's always crossing my fingers at the moment.
Oh, Marcin has just been hooked, Sam. He's got to go.
Has he?
I feel like I'm just, yeah, he's got to go. There's
Wow,
no,
yeah, 64 minutes.
he's just got to. There's no. I should have done that weeks ago. So I think maybe that kind of has sorted out my transfer and captain a little bit. Right. Let's move on to bold claims, because we've got a lot to cover in the questions, and we're trying to keep this fairly short.
Cool. So the news in from this game week is that I think your bold claim has hit again. Because you did 5+ goals, didn't you, in the Spurs Brighton?
I did
Yeah.
indeed.
So 6 goals in that. That's worked out very nice.
Was that 4-4? Because you gave me 2 points for the Luton game, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I sort of half drunkenly gave you 2 points, so we're going to stand by it. I think that's fine. We'll take it to 4-4, and then it's an exciting second half of the season coming up for bold claims. Mine did not hit again, although for a time it looked like it might, with Everton going ahead against Man City, but City did turn it around pretty comfortably in the end. So no bold claim for me last week. This week I am going against City again in a way, because despite them going up against Sheffield United, I am punting on Alvarez blanking against Sheffield United this game week.
That's like a 1 in 5 bold claim hit rate, 4 out of 19 each. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not too bad. They're bold claims, right?
So 21% of the time it works every time. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that. All right, and no, I like yours, and mine is that Luton take points off Chelsea. Just because I'm following a trend there, really. I just fancy them, given how Chelsea have been. I did squeak over the line versus Crystal Palace, but I don't know. I've got a good feeling about that one coming in again. It being quite difficult for them at Kenilworth Road. We'll have to see. I think there'll be a lot of it'll be quite physical joust, I think, that game. It'll be quite an interesting one. I don't know, TNT. I'm looking forward to watching the highlights, that's for sure. Seeing how many yellow cards. I was considering, it was between that and kind of 5+ yellow cards in that game, and I kind of wish I'd gone for that one now. But hey, there we go. Excellent. Right, let's move on to the questions from X this week. Thank you so much for getting them in. I pretty much put it on, got in the car, drove home, and closed it straight away because I just had too much to do before this pod. Well, the first question is the Salah Sonundrum. Lots of questions on this. I'm going to pick out 3 just to highlight a few different dimensions you can look at this question. One's from Don't Panic. Any thoughts on how we get them back later? Is it worth leaving one benched if there's lots of value tied up? Ross L, is it worth ditching one early to have the 2 transfers ready to bring Haaland back in 21, and which? And also, I had another one somewhere, but I've lost it. So we'll go for those 2 for now. I think we spoke about leaving one on the bench last week, potentially. I think it kind of impacts me a bit more than you because I've got kind of a strong 8. I wouldn't be minded, to answer Don't Panic this question, to keep them both throughout the course of their international hiatus. I think that it would be a case of a phased withdrawal sort of thing. And I'd be likelier to sell Salah just because that money is probably going to be used to fund Haaland now, albeit I've still got Darwin and Martinelli to get rid of. And I think that it would be the case that I'd if I had to bench one, I'd bench Son at least for 1 week, and then probably look to move him on when I could, because I've still got Shimikas on my bench as well, and it's very situational. Blah blah blah. Usual sort of caveats that you give to that. Sam, on Don't Panic's question, what do you think?
Yeah, so again, like you, Son is a player I'm very slightly considering holding on to and using the Salah funds to spread it a little bit and give myself a stronger 14 to accommodate Son. But I think likelihood is I'll probably be selling both and chasing the upside in midfield, because there are a lot of midfielders I do like the look of at the moment. Although it is a consideration because there is value tied up in them, and it does make them difficult to get back to. So it won't be easy. I've already mapped out a few game weeks in advance to see in sort of in dry runs how would I get back to them, and the answer is not easily, especially in the case of Salah. The one thing that is potentially on our side there, though, is that if Egypt go as far as we think they might go, which is around 23 or 24, then he might only be back for one game week in 25 before Liverpool potentially blank in 26 anyway. And then there's a chance, I believe, that they could also blank a couple of weeks later in, is it 29 or 28?
Yeah, it's
so
League Cup, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. I think they need to get past Arsenal, isn't it, in the FA Cup to blank in one of those weeks, but I can't remember which way round it is.
You asked the wrong guy.
Yeah, there's a difficult fixture in there that they would need to win to potentially get to the FA Cup quarterfinals down the line, and therefore blank it in one of those game weeks. So that basically there is a route which could mean that you might actually be able to go without Salah for a little bit longer if all the chips fall in our favour. However, it's not going to be easy to go without him, even if he does have one or two blanks after he's back. And the way I'd probably have to look at doing it is by taking out one of my middle price midfielders, possibly striker, and downgrading it. So looking at the value in midfield, especially at the moment, players like Garnacho are starting to creep through the woodwork now. So you could possibly downgrade a Saka, for instance, and free up a little bit more money to upgrade another midfielder around game week 25. But short answer is there's not really an easy way of doing it. I'm kind of hoping that something will come up in the next couple of weeks, which makes it more obvious. And we've always got a wild card in our back pocket to use probably around that sort of period of fixtures anyway. So worst case scenario, we can hit the wild card and bring them back in anyway.
And is it worth, to answer Ross's question, ditching one early to have 2 free transfers ready to bring Haaland back in 21? That's always the kind of, do you play what's in front of you? And the noises coming out of Pep are not particularly encouraging, but no. I do find it difficult to really read the tea leaves about something that's going to happen in 2 weeks' time for that Newcastle game, where I'm assuming they're going to want to do everything they can to get Haaland back, right?
Yeah, you'd think for the Newcastle game they'll try their best to have him. It's just whether or not you're that desperate to have him in your FPL team for game week 21. I mean, Newcastle haven't been fantastic recently, but at home they're a much better side than they are away from home at the moment. They'll have had a break as well, importantly, so they'll hopefully be back to relatively their strongest 11 and will have had a bit of rest, which they very desperately need, it seems, at the moment. So maybe they'll be a more difficult team to break down in that game, although obviously, all things willing, you would want Haaland in that game. It's just whether or not you want to tear apart your team to do it. I think in regards to Ross's question on whether to get rid of one of them a week early, I would say, given what we know about both of their fixtures as it stands and the form that Newcastle are in, especially considering Salah being a potential captaincy option this game week, I was initially looking at selling Salah to get Haaland in game week 20, but without any sort of confirmation on Haaland's fitness, number one, and number two, seeing Newcastle performing, especially away from home recently, I'd quite like to keep hold of Salah for that game. And there's no way I'm selling Son a week early. So I think the simple answer probably is I'm going to hold on to both of them in game week 20 and sort it in 21. But there is an argument to get rid of Salah potentially a week early if you were trying to avoid a hit the following week for Haaland, but I personally wouldn't be going for it.
Yeah, it's a very choose your own adventure element about what you do with that current scenario. We've also got a bit of a weird one in game week 21 because that's the split week. So that could also maybe influence decisions, because by my reckoning, Haaland's captain against Newcastle, that's going to be one we're going to have news pre-deadline. And then the other kind of captaincy picks like Salah, not Salah, it wouldn't be Salah then. It would be someone else. If you're backing a Liverpool player versus Bournemouth, maybe backing Bowen against Sheffield United or an Arsenal player against Crystal Palace. Those games are all happening the next week. So there's time in there, which may be a bit kind of confusing. So potentially you kind of buy Haaland for the insurance that week, which may sort of impact your planning going forward. So maybe there is some logic to what Ross is saying there, would be kind of what I'd be thinking. But I'm with you broadly that I probably will be looking to sort that out in the future, and just kind of playing what's in front of me, I think. I mean, have you given much thought to this? I know you probably have, in terms of what you're exactly planning to do over the next few. I think for me, it probably is that kind of phase withdrawal that I've mentioned. So probably going to end up with a few weeks of having Son, or at least 1 week of having Son and Tsimikas on my bench, and it may well be that Tsimikas gets replaced before Son. It just depends on kind of what's going on at that time, because Haaland's going to have to come in, probably going to have to buy a Saka or a Bowen in over that period, although Arsenal attack aren't exactly filling me with any sort of sense of urgency at the moment. I don't know. I think it probably will be a phase withdrawal, especially if I do make a move this week. And as I said earlier, I really need to get rid of Martinelli. I really do. Just emotionally need to just uncouple myself from that individual. What about you?
Yeah, a phase withdrawal for me is definitely most likely at the moment. Salah being the first one to definitely go in 21. Son might be in 21 as well, but more likely 22. I think if anything else came up and I had to keep him on my bench after 422 as well, then I'd actually consider just holding on to him regardless, because it's only another 2 game weeks at most that I'd be missing out. So I could potentially look at holding him just throughout. But yeah, for me, it's probably this week. I do have a move I could, or several moves I could make, but it would lock me into a hit for next week. We'll go on to the different avenues in just a moment's time. But for now, I think doing nothing this week, making a double swap to get rid of Darwin for Haaland and probably sorting out Salah as well without taking the hit will be a little bit of an upside, an advantage for me over the crowd, who hopefully will have to take a hit to sort out 1 or 2 issues.
No, cool. Certainly makes sense. A knock on from this is from Nate Jacobson, who says, if Trent is a must-have for all the spare, is Trent a must-have with all the spare cash floating about? And I suppose you've kind of gone there already. You kind of spoke for a little bit on the last pod. Obviously, it was near Christmas, so I forgive anyone who didn't listen to that. What was the reasoning in the end for bringing Trent in?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't just a little bit of gamble there, just because it was Christmas and I thought, well, I'll treat myself because I love Trent. But the logic being that obviously Haaland we didn't get completely solid news on. I didn't know how long he'd be out for, and obviously with the tight turnaround between Everton and Sheffield United, if he wasn't going to make Everton, there was always going to be a chance that he wasn't going to make Sheffield United. And I had sort of come to terms with the idea of, if I needed to get Haaland back in and I was certain I wanted to captain him, I would have been comfortable enough taking a hit to do so. It doesn't look like that's going to be a problem. So bringing in Trent, it does mean that the funds aren't readily available, but I knew that I'd only have to survive 1 game week before I could free up the funds by getting rid of Salah anyway. And I just think with Trent, yes, Liverpool aren't quite as good a defence statistically as Arsenal, but they're still up there as one of the best. he is the top bonus point scorer out of all players in FPL this season. And despite getting a yellow card, also got maximum bonus this game week. He looks like the key creator at Liverpool at the moment. And when Salah does go, I think that will almost take another mini step up. So I love having him in my team already. I think it's going to be hopefully a key little advantage to me over some of the crowd, because I think he's around 34% EO going into this game week. That will rise and rise and rise, but I've hopefully gotten ahead of the crowd a little bit there. But yeah, I think over the next 3 or 4 game weeks, it's a long enough stretch where we won't need all of those premiums, Son, Salah and Haaland all at once, means that I can probably distribute the funds and chase the upside there. And I think the points difference he'll have over most of the other defenders, given it's quite a scarce pack of defenders to pick from at the moment, that I'm feeling quite confident that it's going to hopefully pay off, even if I need to take a hit at the end of it to get back to that 3 premium structure, or 2 premium plus Son structure.
Yeah, certainly. I think it made a lot of sense, really, when we spoke about it in the morning before the deadline.
Yeah,
and I think it's a good move, and I kind of wish that I had gone there a little bit, I suppose, because for all the reasons that you cited, effectively, I'm not going to retread over the ground that you've already treaded on. I do think with all the money floating around, we are going to have a unique situation, I suppose, as you, and FPL General recounted, thought about a couple of weeks ago. My feeling is that many will hold the money for Haaland, or at least have a route back to Haaland, which is okay. But I don't think that's going to be as difficult, really. Yes, if you go for Trent plus Trippier plus X plus Y. But I mean, you've got Trent and you've got Haaland, and you've got Salah and Son at the moment. If you remove one of them and then replace them with Haaland, you've still got the other one's money floating around. And then, as you said earlier on, if you do want to kind of reconstitute where you were before, you've got the wild card in your back pocket. So I don't know, it's one of those where I think you look at it and you kind of do feel a bit worried about how am I going to make this all sort of work again in the future. But what's to say what the template's going to be in 3 or 4 weeks, or at least who the it players are, or how we're going to be kind of navigating the new problems that FPL is going to throw up. So it's one of those that I think if you can get Trent, or you have got Trent, then fair play. If you haven't got Trent, then he should be definitely one that you'd be thinking about. But definitely keep an eye on the fact that it's not going to be forever that you're going to have the Haaland money to spend. Nonetheless, yes, you might be able to get away with it for quite a while. Might take a hit or two, but I'm not too worried about doing that. I know that you're a bit more worried than I am about doing that, but I wouldn't be too worried about that at all. Next question: FPL Cosmos going to buy a goalie. Which one do I buy? I don't know how to answer that one, to be honest. Now I've given up on goalkeepers. Pick one and stick with it. It's kind of just what I'd say. As long as they're playing, it doesn't matter. I really can't pick one out, because I think if I pick one out this week, I'd pick out a different one next week, to be honest. So I don't think that we're going to spend time on that one. Sorry, Cosmos. Hopefully you can find one that works for you. Jimmy the Claret, has the Solanke ship sailed? I did see this kind of line of reasoning cropping up on X, Sam, over the course of the last week. That Solanke, yes, okay, he's kind of scored his hat trick. And scored against United 2 weeks ago, and obviously in the week that they missed the game against Luton. Well, missed, but the game got postponed against Luton for obviously sad reasons. He scored in that as well. There is that kind of feeling that well, let's move on to the next guy now. Those points have already sort of happened. Spurs, Liverpool, West Ham next, and they're kind of an okay couple, Nottingham Forest and Fulham, and then Newcastle, Man City before 27 to 32. Or another good run of fixtures. So you could kind of think, well, okay, I'm going to leave it till game week 27. That said, though, Solanke is 4th overall for XG, and he is in 6th for non-pen XGI this season. So a good asset. And I think it's probably one of those things where you're always looking for players, I suppose, that just poo points. And then Solanke is one of those players who does seem to be doing that, especially in a period where we're looking at less players able to do that. I was thinking of a nicer way to embellish that, but I think I'm going to go for the basic look there. What do you think, Sam? Has a Slanky ship sailed?
No, I'm quite bullish. I don't think it has at all. I think there's plenty of time, and Tottenham's next up. We've just seen them concede 4. They're without both of their centre backs at the moment. I think it's absolutely fine to go full steam ahead on Solanke at the moment. I'm considering it as an option. I think the only reason I'm not more bullish is because I've got one striker which is going to become Haaland very, very soon. So any Solanke move would be a 1-week punt if I was moving away from Darwin. And then the other one's Watkins. And despite only 1 return in the last 5, I'm still pretty bullish on Watkins as well. I still think he'll be fine. So my only other route is to switch up to a 3-4-3. And that makes other moves more difficult over the next few weeks as well. And it means that I'm spending an extra 2.5 million in my attack when eventually I need to get it back to midfield as well. So yeah, I mean, he's a player that I am very, very scared of week in, week out at the moment. I think he'll keep returning. I think he's in fantastic form. Bournemouth look brilliant. I think they'll score goals against Tottenham. I wouldn't be worried about the Liverpool game in particular. And then, like you say, after that, the fixtures are fine. And generally speaking, with a talismanic striker like that, who's on penalties as well, and the data's good, and Bournemouth are creating chances almost solely for him at this point, I would never be worried about any fixture. He's definitely playable in every single game week this season. Even Man City away from home, I wouldn't be scared of playing him. So, yeah, I mean, Solanke, very, very happy with him. It's just I probably have not got the right structure myself to get to him, which fills me with quite a lot of dread.
So over 2 in 5 of Bournemouth goals this season, so 44% have been scored by Solanke.
Yeah.
12 goals for Bournemouth have scored 27. I think that, yes, it comes back to talisman theory with a player like Solanke. At the price, you probably just go for that and build your team around the talisman. And maybe that's something that I need to think about a little bit as well. So, thinking about a Marseille replacement, yeah, okay, I could go for a Foden, something like that, shoot for the moon, but probably the likeliest thing I should probably do is buy a talisman, and that is very likely to be, oh, hello, Jared Bowen against Brighton with dunk suspended. I think that's kind of a way that you kind of look at it. And with Solanke, I think he falls into that same category of a player just shits points. So yeah, that's what you're going to be looking for, and you'll be looking for those talisman in FPL. You definitely do it in draft, definitely do it in Sky, and you should definitely do it in FPL. I think that maybe that's kind of where you go with Solanke. Do you have any plans whatsoever to bring in Solanke, Sam?
There's a very outside route for me to get to Solanke, like I said, but it would have to be, well, one of two things. We'd have to get news that Haaland's out for a while, and therefore I can sell Darwin to Solanke without worrying about booking in an extra transfer, or I'd have to move to a 3-4-3 because I'm definitely not getting rid of Watkins at the moment. I still think he's good for points and he's got some great fixtures to come. So yeah, the 3-4-3 is tempting, but it sends me down a bit of a path because I've already spent a bit of money in the back line on Trent where you haven't at the moment. It means that it locks me in a little bit, and it means that if I then did a double switch next week to bring in Haaland for Darwin, I couldn't get to Bowen, for example, from Salah. I'd have to go for someone bargain basement, maybe like a Garnacho, for instance, to make that all work, which isn't crazy, and it's not out of the realms of possibility. And it's not like I'm just throwing that option to one side because I am tempted by Solanke. I just think that it's probably like a 2 to 3% chance I take that sort of route at the moment, because it'll be a serious path away from where I'm currently heading towards. Yeah. And I don't know if that's really the right move for my team, and it probably locks me into a hit next week as well. So yeah. Sadly, I think I'm going to have to go without him at the moment.
There's going to be so many hits flying around over the next few weeks.
There will be.
I think that's fun, though. It always kind of, I guess, makes it more interesting when teams are in a state of transition and you're trying to, I guess, predict where to go next, especially as teams start to grow stale, as mine definitely has, and I suppose a lot of teams out there are. Final question is agglomeration of many different questions because the midfield market, transfer nightmares are everywhere. The third question I meant to ask earlier about the Salah and Sonundrum is from little Jason, who also said he had Son and Salah, also has Kudus and 3 yellow flag defenders. How do I begin to solve this mess? Kieran FPL Discomfort asks, would you prefer Odegaard or Foden if you were looking at a move in midfield this week? And you can link these to other transfer related questions in midfield. FPL Stoop, how would you rank Jota, Foden, Garnacho, and Richarlison as potential transfers in? And FPL Psychologist, if one is to sell Saka, who do you replace him with? So, I mean, I think we should try to answer these just by talking about the likely lads in midfield. I think we can probably maybe come back to this next week, Sam, for the full fat pod. But here, I think let's kind of start to set the groundwork there. So Salah and Son comfortably the highest scorers in midfield, going to be out of the game fairly soon, and naturally your eye, because that's kind of what everyone else is going to do, looks to kind of who's third in the rankings, and that's going to be Bowen. I think you're going to see that ownership rocket. You really are. And I think that with Bryson up next, as I mentioned earlier, with no Dunk, I think he's going to be probably a prime transfer in for anybody who's bored with a midfield asset they don't want anymore. But beyond that, yes, you are into kind of the funky punty territory. Kieran saying Odegaard and Foden. We mentioned Odegaard when Mark was on. And FPL Stoop looking at lots of Jota, Garnacho, who you mentioned on Twitter earlier on, and Richarlison, who's kind of been in and around the sort of template, and Foden too, who I've mentioned as a kind of a bit of a sneaky pick if you are kind of holding fast to the idea that he's going to be playing in that 10 role. There is a Newcastle game in Game Week 21 where they are going to be a bit more rested, but that game is sandwiched by really good home games against Sheffield United and Burnley. So loads and loads of stuff potentially for you to be looking at there. I mean, where are you with all of these sorts of players who are going to be replacing Salah and Son?
Yeah, it's tough. To quote you, it's a choose your own adventure at this point, isn't it? I am tempted by Foden, but like I was saying to you offline, I think there's a chance that we don't yet know where he's going to land on the pitch. He will get good minutes, but we don't exactly know what role that will be, with Haaland probably coming back fairly soon, with Alvarez probably moving position, KDB not too far off. It makes his role in the side not questionable in the sense that he won't start the game, but where is he going to fit in? And that does worry me a little bit. And even just looking at the data across the season, it's not fantastic. It's 0.42, I think, XGI per 90, or well, at least it is on the FPL site, which isn't bad, but it's not blowing me away. Odegaard's, I do like the look of, a bit more expensive, obviously, which brings with it its own issues. The other two, or the other three that were mentioned there, Jota, I really do like the look of, but again, I think I'd have to wait a week or two just to prove that he's fit enough to start. I think once Salah goes, he is likely to get very, very good minutes. And if I'm confident that he's getting 70, 80 minutes a match and not coming off the bench in any of those, then he's probably my favourite of the bunch. But that's a big asterisk because we just don't know that at the moment. Garnacho is, again, your bargain basement option, but I would put him below most of these guys if they were all the same price. Richarlison, a couple of weeks ago when we were talking to General, it was very, very high in mind. Him getting taken off early week in, week out due to a little bit of what sounds like a back knock at the moment. So again, question marks over that fitness. Again, by the time we get to 21, it might not be an issue anymore. So it's worth monitoring that. That might be fine by the time we get to it. But if that sort of issue persists into Game Week 21, then 60 minutes a match of Richarlison probably isn't enough, especially when they've lost a lot of other players at the moment. And Son obviously won't be there. One of their literal best players won't be there to help him put the ball in the net. So, yeah, I think out of all of them, Jota and Odegaard are probably the most tempting two, with Jota being probably to one side if we know that he's going to get good minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably about right for me as well. I think I think you have to be looking at I don't know. I think probably I'll be going for Bowen next, but I do like the look of a few of these sort of puntier sort of players around the block. If that makes sense, like. I do like the idea of having that kind of one player who is going to make a difference for you, who is going to be low owned. So if you are kind of sat on Saka already, you've got your Arsenal defender. If you do go for Odegaard, because our fixtures are still really good. Fulham next, Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest next 3. We've just conceded a penalty, by the way.
Oh wow!
So it's gonna. Oh God, that's not great, is it? But yes, I don't know. I think there's definitely going to be a lot of really interesting players taking the field. And we haven't even mentioned Brighton, whose fixtures up until game week 28 are just ridiculously good. But trying to find exactly who that's going to be is almost impossible. Like Pascal Gross probably is the one who comes to the fore as being kind of the 90-minute man of them all. But if he's got no one else, well, I don't know, because they've just scored a resounding victory. Bonanotte is also kind of in the mix. And if you are looking for a forward, I think João Pedro probably is to the fore now. He's going to be now for the minutes. Hauled bigly tonight with those 2 penalties and also the assist. There's lots of players who are going to be in and about the meta. If I was going to rank for Stoop those 4 players, I think I would be looking at Foden first just for this week because these are all punty picks. Then Richarlison is a slightly longer one, but one you can get a bit later on. And then Garnacho and Jota are probably where I go with that. Selling Saka, Sam, as FPL psychologist has said, he's not going to be a player that you're looking to sell, is he? I mean, he's a player that I guess is firmly in the don't buy, don't sell camp right now. But the fixtures remain good. And it's one that you're probably not going to be, I suppose, looking to get rid of because you've got other fish to fry, as I think we all have right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're in a position where you've got the transfers to sell Saka, then fair play. I don't know how you've managed to work out a side that has only that as your biggest issue at the moment. But yeah, I mean, he is frustrating at the moment in terms of output, but the data on the whole has been pretty good. Obviously hit the post tonight as well. But, you know, we all have pretty short fuses at the moment when it comes to actual outcomes and actual returns in FPL. We want the points on the board, right? So I do understand the instinct to want to get rid of players that aren't doing the points, but I think based on the data, based on the quality of the player, and based on the quality of the team, he should come good at some point. It's not looking fantastic at the moment, but I still back him to do all right. And considering the amount of other things I need to do in my side, and I'm sure in a lot of other sides that of managers that are listening in today, he would be a very low priority sell. Although in a perfect world, I could understand it. But I think there are just simply so many other problems that are much, much bigger at the moment.
So the Arsenal match just finished at the last minute. Raya saved a penalty from Ben Rama.
Yeah.
But Areola's come out with a 10-pointer.
Of course he has.
So
away at Arsenal.
It's amazing. You know, again, the curse of the keeper continues, but we've just got other things to deal with at the moment. And I don't think on either of our parts there's a consideration to play a wild card early. At the moment, I think if I was kind of, you're really looking at kind of being in the millions, 2 million or so. I'd say to be looking at that. Right now, but yeah, it's just been a joke. It really has. Let's move on to transfers and captains then. Finish this one off for this year. What are we going to do here? Actually, no, Sam. There was one more question. Actually, it was for this year, 2013. Sorry, 2013. I wish it was 2013.
10 years back. Wow.
2023. FPL store Russell. Hi Russell. Says, as it's the end of the year pod, what game week of 2023 was your most memorable? Hall differential captain that came in, etc., etc.
So are we counting 2023 as a calendar year rather
as
than
a calendar year?
Perfect.
So.
Captaining Wilson for the double game week rather than going with the crowd with Isak rather. Absolutely catapulted me up the ranks. Really made a massive difference on my season. So yeah, definitely captaining Wilson in that double game week Newcastle had. I think it was around game week 32, 33 last season. But very much in 2023. So I'm going with that.
I think it's it was in February last year, but this year, sorry. But the Matoma, but when Matoma was assisted by Stepinian, they're both owned by less than 5%. That was like the moment.
Nice.
Yeah, that was great, and that kind of just basically meant that I was like pretty much guaranteed the top 20k finish. I think I went up to 4k or something with that. Shut the bed a little bit and end up kind of 17k or whatever it was, but that kind of guaranteed me that kind of really high finish because there were points that no one else was going to get, and it was quite a big sort of steal there with the season it was. So yeah, that's kind of those are the moments you live for and the moments you hope to get. Transfers and captains this week. Marcelli has to go. I've had enough. I know that you should be rolling. Blah blah blah. I'm going to get rid of him, and I'm sure he's going to score. And I'm sure the chance that he missed today, when any other season he picks it out and puts it in top corner, blazed it wide. I'm sure he's going to score against Fulham, 100%. I don't care. Getting rid of him, emotional break. Probably going to get Bowen in. I know it's not a particularly sexy transfer, but I think it's just one that probably makes a lot of sense with Brighton up next. And I think that kind of, I'll leave it there. I'll have double Arsenal defence against Fulham. So, Raul Jimenez comes back, reinvigorates their defence. They score 3 or 4. Darwin does then stay another week, but I'm going to keep in keep into 3-4-3 for me for the time being, and that means that Gordon stays on the bench against Liverpool away. I think I heard on Planet FPL that Newcastle have not won away this season, apart from against Sheffield United. So, given how they've been recently, would back quite heavily a Newcastle loss against Liverpool. Captaincy wise, safe pick has gone Salah. I'm kind of quite minded to do that. I think that Son is the one coming on top of algorithms. I think people who aren't really kind of thinking about it too much will shove it on him against Bournemouth. I'm between Salah and Watkins, and I've got a sneaky feeling I might put it on Watkins and kind of start to pursue this aggressive strategy. Now we're in the second half of the season, but I'm not entirely sure yet. We will see kind of where I end up tomorrow. Yeah, that's probably where it's going to be. I'm not going to make a transfer tonight, I don't think, just because I'm too annoyed at this whole fantasy football malarkey. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm. The team's looking all right. Again, it always looks all right. But I think removing Martinelli is just something I've got to do. What about you?
Yep, that makes sense. Here's my team 3-5-2 at the moment. So rather than your 3-4-3, starting Gordon away at Liverpool as it stands is one of the key differences there. Obviously, don't have Solanke. Do have Trent though in the back line against Newcastle at home, so quite fancy that. The captaincy is on Son at the moment, but I've given it absolutely no thought whatsoever. That was more just an auto pick when the game loaded. It could very easily end up being any one of Saka, Salah, Son, Watkins, possibly even Trent at the back wouldn't be the worst shout ever. But I think most likely out of all of them would probably be Salah or Watkins as it stands. I really fancy that Burnley fixture for Watkins, and my gut is maybe whispering to me that if I'm playing the fixture, that would be the play, especially when he's only returned 1 in 5. I don't think the crowd will go that way. So I think that's one of those sort of marginal calculated gambles that I quite like to take. So I do quite like the look of that. Obviously, it sounds like you might as well.
That's where it's lost at the moment. Yeah.
So I'll see how I feel. I'll crunch the numbers a bit more tomorrow. Salah would be the other one. Son, I was warmer on it when the game first loaded, but I'm going off of it a little bit now, especially considering Bournemouth's form. But yeah, overall, it does look good on paper. There's a few moves I could make. One would be in the back line to remove Lascelles to bring in Gabriel, for instance, or maybe Gusto at Chelsea. But I think that's forcing a move when I don't really need to make one there. Gordon in the midfield could go, and I could look at maybe Garnacho or Bowen as well. But again, that kind of locks me into a hit next week. And then up front, like I mentioned, I could look at moving Archer on for Solanke and switch to a 3-4-3. Overall, though, with all of those things considered, I think as it stands, the most likely move is just to roll it. And then I can do the Haaland switcheroo next week for free. If I need to.
Cool. Perfect. Well, that is WGTA for 2023, Sam. It's been a good half year. I'm very glad. I should get that away now. I'm very glad that I got you on board. It's been really fun to pod with you. Reinvigorated my love of FPL. Not that Lucy destroyed my love of FPL, but it's definitely been a lot more. Even though it's been I've been a bit depressed this week. Obviously, in the context of FPL, it's not real life. But yes, it's always good to speak to you, and it always kind of makes me feel a bit more kind of optimistic about next week. So yes, thank you very much for your time in the first half of the season. Hopefully, you're not making plans to disappear at the end of the season, and I'm not sharpening the axe quite yet, but we'll see how it goes over the course of the second half of the season. But happy New Year to you.
And you, thank you very much. And yeah, one of my highlights has genuinely been being invited on this show. So thank you so much for having me on. 2023 has been a blast. Hopefully 2024 will be full of green arrows and many, many more podcasts with you. And hopefully for all of you, you'll tune in along with us in the new year. In the meantime, thank you all so much for listening. We were Who Got the Assist. As always, you can find us on X at WGTA_FPL, and you can find me over there at FPL Pricey. On Instagram and Threads as well, it's WGTA.FPL. Again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there. If you could follow us on those socials, if you enjoyed today's pod, that would be fantastic. But also, if you could give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. And of course, if you've tuned in today, whether it be live or running it back tomorrow morning, then if you're watching on YouTube, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, though, a very happy new year from me.
Yep, thank you very much for listening. Happy New Year to you all. We hope you enjoyed the pod. We hope we assisted you in 2023. We'll be back again on, I think it's Tuesday, the 2nd of January. Speak then, enjoy the weekend, and enjoy New Year's Eve, etc., etc. Ciao for now.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?